Adrianna's Chickens, an original story by Anne Schraff. Jorge was a poor farmer who lived in Sinaloa, Mexico. After his hard-working wife died, Jorge and his 3 children struggled to make a living. One day, Jorge gathered his children around him and said, "We have only a little money left. We need to invest it wisely. Go to the pueblo and choose something that will make life easier for us." Jorge gave some coins to his eldest son, Carlos, and said, "You are my eldest son, and you are wise." "Gracias, Papa," Carlos said with a proud smile. Jorge gave some coins to his second son, Roberto, and said, "You are younger, but you are also clever." "Gracias, Papa," said Roberto. "What about me?" cried Adrianna, Jorge's only daughter. "Don't I also get some coins?" Jorge smiled at Adrianna. "You are very sensible, my daughter. But what do you know about spending money wisely?" "I work side by side with my brothers on the farm," insisted Adrianna, "and I shall make a good choice." So Jorge gave Adrianna a few coins too. "How foolish," grumbled Roberto. "How silly," snapped Carlos. Carlos was the oldest, and he had the longest legs, so he sprinted ahead of the others. When he reached the town market, Carlos saw vendors selling fruits and vegetables and also animals. "We have no horse," Carlos thought. "It would be fine indeed to have a horse. He could pull our wagon, and Roberto and I could ride him." Carlos didn't have enough coins to buy a really fine horse. The best work horses were too expensive. So Carlos had to choose between a very old horse and a wild horse. He decided on an untamed, beautiful black and white horse. "I shall gentle him," Carlos said to himself, tying a rope around the horse to lead him home. When Roberto got to the market with his coins, he looked at sheep and pigs. He had enough coins to buy a large pig. Said Roberto, smacking his lips. "This pig shall grow even fatter when we feed him. Then we will dine on pork and ham." So Roberto bought the pig, tied a rope around his neck, and led him home. When Adrianna got to the market, she counted her coins. Her father had given her the fewest coins. One vendor was selling beautiful blue and yellow parrots. Although Adrianna admired the parrots, she knew that would not be a wise purchase. Instead, Adrianna bought 2 hens and a rooster in a cage. Then she headed home with the cage. When Carlos and Roberto saw the 2 hens and the rooster, they laughed so hard they fell on the ground. "Silly little sister," Carlos shouted, slapping his thighs. "Look at those scrawny birds. They aren't enough to make a decent dinner for us." "Quit teasing your sister," Jorge said. "She is just a little girl. She does not understand about buying animals." Adrianna just smiled and built a wire coop for the birds. And then she watched Carlos train his new horse. When Carlos climbed on the horse's back, the horse bucked, threw Carlos into the dirt, and began to run. The wild horse leapt right over the coral fence and ran towards the mountains. Carlos and Roberto ran after the horse, but the chase was useless. The horse was gone in a cloud of dust. Roberto grinned and said, "You made a big mistake, Carlos. Only I made a good decision. Soon my pig will be big enough to eat. And what fine meals we will have." Adrianna fed her 2 hens and her rooster and paid no attention to her brothers. Soon the hens began to lay glossy white eggs. Adrianna gathered some of them, and her family had fried eggs and scrambled eggs and omelets. At last, Roberto's pig was big enough to eat. Jorge and his 3 children dined on pork and ham for many days, but then it was all gone. By now, fluffy little yellow baby chicks followed Adrianna's 2 hens around the barnyard. Adrianna had not taken all the eggs. The hens sat on some and hatched big broods of baby chicks. "Ah!" Jorge cried. "We will have many chicken dinners on Sunday. Arroz con pollo, pollo frito." Adrianna smiled quietly and built a bigger chicken coop. Soon the baby eggs grew up and they were laying eggs. So Adrianna took baskets of eggs to the market and sold them. After a while, they had so many roosters that even though Jorge and his family had chicken every Sunday, they had enough roosters to sell. "We have never had such a good life," cried Jorge, "and it is all because of Adrianna's chickens." But Adrianna had little to say. She had an even bigger idea. She had cooked so many chicken dinners for her family that she was now an expert. Everybody said Adrianna's chicken dishes were the best in Sinaloa. So Adrianna put Carlos and Roberto to work, building a restaurant in front of her house. It was right on the highway, and soon many people were coming to taste Adrianna's pollo. Adrianna wore a big white chef's hat, and her long glossy black hair was tied in braids. She had to hire someone to help her cook and wash dishes, so she hired Carlos and Roberto. Her restaurant made so much money that Carlos and Roberto could afford to buy a fine horse and many pigs. And even though her brothers had laughed at Adrianna when she brought home those first 3 skinny birds, Adrianna didn't ever say "I told you so," except maybe once or twice.